The guard's hand was inches from my daughter's face when I felt it, that ancient dormant power exploding through my veins like wildfire through dry timber. "Don't touch my pup." The words came out as a growl that made the marble floors of the high court crack beneath my feet, and I watched, with savage satisfaction, as every single wolf in that gilded chamber, from the lowest gamma to the supreme alpha himself, dropped to their knees. Before I tell you how an omega nobody believed in became the wolf they all feared, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story gets darker, more twisted, and more satisfying with every word. And tell me the city you're watching from so that I can send you a hug. You're going to need it after hearing what they put me through. My name is Żmien. Yes, like the old Maltese word for time, because my mother had a sense of humor about bringing a cursed child into the world during a blood moon. And trust me, in the Ħama Pack, being born under a blood moon as an omega meant you were already dead. You just hadn't stopped breathing yet. 28 years I'd spent in that pack. 28 years of learning that survival meant invisibility, that hope was a luxury reserved for wolves with rank, and that the hierarchy wasn't just a social structure. It was a religious doctrine, enforced with the kind of zealous cruelty that people reserve for defending their gods. I learned early that survival meant invisibility. While other she-wolves preened and postured, training for their chance to catch an alpha's eye, I kept my head down, my scent muted, and my dreams buried so deep I almost forgot they existed. The Ħama Pack wasn't cruel by accident. They were cruel by design, a hierarchy so rigid that you could feel its weight pressing down on your shoulders every single day. The pack house was a monument to that hierarchy. The alphas lived in the upper floors, where floor-to-ceiling windows caught the mountain sun and flooded their rooms with golden light. Floor-to-ceiling windows, heated marble floors, private balconies where they could survey their domain like the gods they believed themselves to be. The betas occupied the middle floors, comfortable enough, respected enough, always positioned perfectly between ambition and servitude. They had carpet, proper beds, rooms they didn't have to share with 5 other wolves. The gammas lived on the ground floor, always ready to serve, always scrambling for scraps of approval, sleeping in dormitory-style rooms where privacy was a fantasy and personal space was measured in inches. And the omegas? We lived in the basement. Not a finished basement with carpet and warmth. A real basement. Concrete floors that stayed cold even in summer, pipes that dripped and groaned through the night like the building itself was weeping, and a dampness that seeped into your bones and never quite left. There were 12 of us down there, sharing 6 rooms that were really just partitioned sections of the larger basement. We fought over 2 showers that only produced lukewarm water on good days, and on bad days gave you nothing but rust-colored trickles that smelled like metal and decay. The ceiling was so low that tall wolves had to hunch. The single window, barred as if we were prisoners rather than pack members, sat at ground level, giving us a perfect view of boots and paws passing by, a constant reminder that everyone else was above us. Literally, always above us. We had a communal bathroom where the toilets barely worked, a kitchen that was really just a hot plate and a mini fridge we'd salvaged from the packhouse trash, and walls so thin you could hear every whispered conversation, every muffled sob, every moment of despair from your fellow omegas. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story really begins 3 years before that moment in the High Court. It begins with Kaval, because doesn't every tragedy begin with an alpha who thinks his desires are laws of nature? Kaval Kejkan was the supreme alpha's nephew, a wolf so beautiful he looked carved from marble and moonlight. Hair the color of winter frost that fell perfectly around a face too symmetrical to be real, eyes like liquid silver that caught the light and held it, and a smile that could make you forget your own name, forget your rank, forget every warning your wolf had ever given you. Every unmated she-wolf in the pack would have killed for a single glance from him. The betas threw themselves at his feet with calculated seduction. Even some of the mated females would watch him with hungry eyes when they thought their partners weren't looking. He chose me. Not because he loved me. Alphas like Kaval didn't love omegas. They collected us like trophies, little broken things to prove their power, to demonstrate that even the lowest could be made to worship them. But I was young and stupid and desperate to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone saw value in me. That maybe the moon goddess hadn't completely forgotten about the girl born under a blood moon. That maybe, despite everything the pack had taught me about my worthlessness, I deserved something good. You're different, Żmien, he told me one night, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin that felt like promises written in lightning. You don't beg for attention like the others. You're real. I should have known better. I should have recognized the predatory gleam in those silver eyes, should have understood that when an alpha calls you different, what he really means is easier to manipulate. Should have remembered that real meant expendable, different meant isolated, special meant alone when the truth came out. We made it in secret. He said it was romantic, stolen moments in the forest where the moonlight filtered through ancient trees and made everything feel sacred. Hidden touches in darkened corridors where the thrill of possibly being caught made my heart race, whispered promises in the dead of night that I replayed in my mind like prayers. He said his family wouldn't understand, that we needed to wait for the right time to announce our bond. That his uncle had political considerations, alliance negotiations, responsibilities that made our relationship complicated. I believed every word. I crafted elaborate fantasies about the day he'd stand before the pack and claim me as his mate, about how shocked everyone would be, about how I'd finally have proof that I mattered. I imagined the look on Cruelty's face when she had to bow to me. I dreamed about moving out of the basement, about sleeping in a real bed with clean sheets and windows that showed sky instead of boots. The right time never came. Instead, I got pregnant. I'll never forget the moment I told him. We were in his room. Yes, he'd snuck me up there, another romantic gesture that I now recognize as the power play it was, the thrill of bringing basement trash into his sanctuary. I'd used 3 different tests, all positive, and my hands shook so badly as I showed them to him that I nearly dropped them. Kaval's beautiful face went blank. Not angry, not upset, blank. Like I just told him the weather forecast, like I'd mentioned that it might rain tomorrow, like I was describing something that had absolutely nothing to do with him. Get rid of it, he said simply. His voice as empty as his expression. Kaval, it's our pup. I started, reaching for him, desperate to make him understand. He jerked away from my touch like I'd burned him. It's a mistake. Complication. Handle it, or I will. But you said you loved me. You said. I said what you needed to hear to keep you quiet and willing, he interrupted, his silver eyes finally showing emotion, contempt pure and poisonous. Did you really think a Supreme Alpha's nephew would bind himself to an Omega? To you. I have a reputation, Żmien. Future. And neither of those includes basement trash and her bastard. He threw money at me. Literally threw it, bills fluttering through the air like dying birds. That should cover whatever procedure you need. Don't contact me again. I stood there in his luxurious room, surrounded by all the comfort and beauty that would never be mine, holding 3 positive pregnancy tests and a handful of scattered bills, and felt something inside me break. Not my heart, that was too simple, too clean. This was deeper. This was the breaking of whatever naive, hopeful part of me had believed in fairy tales and true mates and happily ever afters. Kept the money. Kept the baby. And I started planning. 2 months later, I was standing in front of the entire pack, my small belly just starting to show beneath the loose shirt I'd worn specifically to hide it for as long as possible. But Cruella had noticed, had made it her personal mission to expose the pregnant Omega, and had called a formal assembly to address my condition. Kaval stood beside his chosen mate, Dija Cable, a beta from a prominent family whose bloodline was as pristine as her reputation. They looked perfect together, all golden elegance and matched ambition, like something out of a painting titled, The Ideal Couple. Her hand rested possessively on his arm, her perfectly manicured nails a stark contrast to my broken, bitten ones. Her hair was styled elaborately, held in place with silver pins that probably cost more than I'd earn in a year. Her dress was clearly tailored, fitted to show off her figure while remaining tasteful enough for pack assembly. I stood in the Omega section at the back of the hall, in a shirt I'd stolen from the donation bin and pants that had been mended so many times they were more patches than original fabric. The Omega is lying, Kaval announced, his voice carrying across the assembly hall with practiced ease, with the confidence of someone who'd never been questioned, never been doubted, never been held accountable. I never touched her. This is clearly an attempt to trap me into a bond using another wolf's bastard. Dija pressed close to his side, her hand possessive on his arm, her smile sharp as knives and twice as cruel. It's pathetic, really. Everyone knows Omegas will do anything to climb above their station. They have no shame, no dignity. They'll lie about anything if they think it might benefit them. The pack believed him. Course they did. Why would a Supreme Alpha's nephew, a wolf with options like Dija Cable, lower himself to mate with basement trash? Why would he risk his carefully cultivated reputation, his political prospects, his place in pack hierarchy for someone like me? Several wolves testified on his behalf. Beta females who swore they'd seen me with multiple males. Gammas who claimed I'd propositioned them. Even one of my fellow Omegas, broken enough by the pack's cruelty to throw me to the wolves for a chance at slightly better treatment, stood up and said she'd seen me leave the pack house with unmated males on multiple occasions. Lies. But lies told by higher-ranked wolves carried more weight than truth spoken by an Omega. I tried to defend myself. Tried to explain that Caval and I had been meeting in secret for months, that I had no reason to lie, that I'd never been with anyone else. But my voice got lost in the crowd's jeers and laughter, drowned out by the collective agreement that I was exactly what they'd always known me to be. Worthless, lying, grasping Omega trash trying to pull down a wolf better than herself. The child is a bastard, Herba Warana, the Supreme Alpha, declared from his throne. The Omega will be disciplined for attempting to deceive the pack and for bringing shame to our reputation. As for the pup, he paused, his cold eyes calculating. We'll decide its fate after the birth. An Omega clearly unfit to be a mother should not be allowed to raise a child, especially one born of lies and deceit. The threat was clear. They might not let me keep my baby. I was stripped of what little status I had. My already meager rations were cut in half, barely enough to sustain me, certainly not enough for a pregnant wolf. I was moved from the small basement room I'd shared with two other Omegas to a storage closet barely big enough for a mattress, a space that had previously been used to store cleaning supplies and broken furniture. The door didn't lock from the inside. There was no window. The single light bulb flickered constantly and sometimes didn't work at all, leaving me in complete darkness. And every day, every single day, pack members would go out of their way to remind me what I was. Omega whore, they'd whisper when I passed in the hallways, loudly enough for me to hear but quietly enough that they could deny it if challenged. Probably doesn't even know who the father is. They'd laugh over breakfast while I served them their meals, part of my new duties, to work off the resources I was wasting by continuing to exist. That pup is going to be as worthless as its mother, they'd comment while I scrubbed floors on my hands and knees, my pregnant belly making the work painful and awkward. Should have gotten rid of it like any sensible Omega would have, Cruella told me directly once, her voice dripping with contempt as she inspected my cleaning work and found it deliberately wanting. But I suppose intelligence isn't an Omega trait, is it? The physical abuse was casual and constant. Shoulders deliberately checking into me hard enough to send me stumbling. Doors accidentally swung into my path. Wolves who'd walk just close enough to make me flinch, then laugh at my fear. Someone poured bleach on my mattress once, forcing me to sleep on bare concrete for 3 nights until I could steal another one from storage. Another time, someone locked me in the cleaning closet during a pack run, leaving me trapped for 14 hours with no food, no water, and no bathroom access. But here's what they didn't understand. You can only break someone so many times before they stop breaking and start hardening. Every insult, every sneer, every deliberate shoulder check in the hallway was another layer of steel forming around my heart. Every casual cruelty was another reminder that I couldn't rely on anyone's mercy, anyone's compassion, anyone's basic decency. I would survive this. Not for me. I'd stopped mattering to myself a long time ago. Somewhere around the 5th time someone had tripped me for entertainment or the 20th time I'd gone to bed hungry, Żmien the person had become irrelevant. But for the life growing inside me, the tiny heartbeat I could feel fluttering like butterfly wings against my ribs. That pup would live. That pup would be loved. That pup would know her worth even if the entire world told her she had none. My daughter was born on a winter night so cold the pipes in the basement froze solid. I labored alone in that storage closet, biting down on a rolled-up towel to keep from screaming, because I knew that if the pack heard me suffering, they'd enjoy it too much. Some of them would probably come to watch, to see the Omega whore getting what she deserved. The pain was extraordinary. Not just the physical pain of childbirth, which was intense enough on its own, but the loneliness of it. The knowledge that I was bringing a life into the world with no support, no help, no one who cared whether either of us survived. I'd stolen medical supplies over the previous weeks. Clean towels, scissors, string to tie off the umbilical cord, basic first aid supplies. I'd watched educational videos on an old phone I'd found in the packhouse trash and repaired. I'd prepared as much as an Omega with no resources could prepare. But nothing prepares you for the reality. Nothing prepares you for the moment when you realize you might die here, alone in a storage closet, and no one would know until they found your body. Nothing prepares you for pushing a new life into the world, while simultaneously terrified that you're failing them before they've even drawn their first breath. Labor lasted 17 hours. 17 hours of agony in that tiny closet, biting down on that towel until my jaw ached, breathing through contractions that felt like my body was tearing itself apart. I passed out twice from the pain and woke up in pools of my own blood, terrified that I'd somehow hurt the baby during my unconsciousness. When Tama finally slipped into my arms, tiny and perfect and screaming with furious life, I understood for the first time what it meant to have something worth dying for, worth killing for, worth burning down the entire world for. I named her Tama, the old Maltese word for there, because there in my arms was my entire world. There in her eyes was every reason I needed to keep breathing. There in her existence was proof that I had created something pure in the midst of all this ugliness. There was my purpose, my future, my reason for enduring every moment of suffering that had led to this one. She had Caval's silver eyes. That was the cruel joke the moon goddess played. Every time I looked at my daughter, I saw the wolf who'd destroyed me. But I also saw myself, saw the determination in those tiny features, saw something else. Strength. Even as a newborn, Tama had a presence that made the shadows lean closer, that made the air feel charged with electricity. When she cried, the light bulb in the closet would flicker in time with her distress. When she nursed, I could feel power thrumming through her tiny body like a second heartbeat. The pack's treatment of us got worse. If I thought they were cruel before, I'd been naive. Now they had a new target, a helpless pup they could hurt to hurt me worse. And hurt a child was always more effective than hurting an adult, because adults could endure pain for themselves, but watching your child suffer was a torture that had no equal. Cruelty, the beta female who managed the pack house and had made tormenting Omegas her personal hobby, cut my rations even further. Omegas need to earn their food, she said with a smile like curdled milk, like expired promises. And you've been underperforming. Your cleaning is sloppy. Your attitude is problematic. Why should the pack waste resources on wolves who don't contribute? I was nursing. I needed those rations desperately. My body was trying to produce milk while simultaneously healing from childbirth, all on maybe 800 calories a day. I could feel myself getting weaker, could see my ribs starting to show, could feel the dizziness that came with malnutrition. But Cruella didn't care, and neither did anyone else. If anything, they enjoyed it. Enjoyed watching me struggle. Enjoyed the power they had over me and my helpless infant. I started stealing. Small things at first. Extra portions from the communal meals that I'd hide in my pockets and eat later in my closet. Food left unguarded in the kitchens during shift changes. Scraps from the garbage that were still edible if you weren't picky. And I couldn't afford to be picky. But then Tama needed clothes because babies grow impossibly fast. Needed blankets because that storage closet was freezing and she was so small, so fragile. Needed medicine when she caught a fever at 2 months old that wouldn't break, and I was convinced, absolutely convinced, that she was going to die because I couldn't afford the proper medicine, couldn't access the pack doctor without permission I'd never be granted. Became very good at stealing. I learned which pack members were careless with their belongings, which stores in the nearby town had the worst security, which delivery trucks left supplies unattended. I learned to pick locks with tools I'd fashioned from bent paperclips and stolen wire. I learned to forge signatures on requisition forms. I learned to lie so convincingly that even I almost believed myself. I also became very good at fighting. Not the formal combat training that higher-ranked wolves received. All honor and rules and referee-supervised matches. No, I taught myself to fight in that storage closet, practicing strikes against the concrete walls until my knuckles bled and healed and bled again. Learning to move silently because noise drew attention and attention was dangerous. Learning to make myself dangerous because the only thing predators respected was the threat of injury. I studied anatomy from stolen medical textbooks, where to strike to incapacitate, to maim, to kill if necessary. I practiced on rats at first, the ones that infested the basement, learning how much pressure it took to break bone, to rupture organs, to end life efficiently. Then I practiced on myself, learning my own pain tolerance, learning to fight through injuries that would stop other wolves, learning to turn pain into fuel instead of weakness. Because I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the way the pack looked at Tama, in the whispers that followed us everywhere. They wanted to take her from me. They wanted to prove that an Omega couldn't raise a pup, that I was as worthless as they'd always claimed. And I would die, literally die, before I let that happen. Tama's second birthday was when everything started to change. We were in the communal dining area. I'd managed to sneak us in during the tail end of breakfast service, hoping to grab some food before we were noticed and inevitably kicked out or harassed. Tama was holding my hand, chattering away in that endless stream of consciousness way toddlers do, telling me about a dream she'd had about flying wolves and singing moons and forests made of starlight. Then she suddenly stopped walking. "Mama," she whispered, her silver eyes fixed on something across the room. "The lights are talking." I followed her gaze. She was staring at the chandelier, an ornate monstrosity of crystal and gold that the Supreme Alpha had installed to showcase his wealth. It was gaudy, ostentatious, the kind of thing that screamed, "I have money and you don't," in the most vulgar way possible. "Sweetness, lights can't talk," I started to say, but then the chandelier began to glow. Not the normal glow of its bulbs. This was different. This was moonlight and starfire and something ancient pouring through the crystals, and every wolf in the room felt it. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant. The silverware on the tables began to vibrate, making a sound like distant bells. And the light was alive, pulsing in time with Tama's heartbeat, reaching out with tendrils of luminescence that touched every wolf present. The room went silent. Conversations died mid-word. Wolves froze with forks halfway to their mouths. Everyone was staring at my daughter, and the looks on their faces ranged from shock to fear to barely concealed hunger. Seekan Bajda, one of the Gamma enforcers, stood up from his table. He was a massive wolf, all scarred muscle and barely contained violence, the kind of wolf the pack used when they needed someone hurt efficiently and quietly. What kind of dark magic is the Omega teaching her bastard? I pulled Tama behind me, my heart hammering hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. "She's just a pup. She didn't do anything. Didn't do anything." Krula had appeared from the kitchen, her face twisted with malicious glee, practically glowing with the opportunity to cause more suffering. Everyone saw it. That thing made the lights react. "She's corrupted. Cursed. She needs to be dealt with before she poisons the whole pack." "She's 2 years old," I snarled, and something in my voice made Seekan hesitate. For just a second, but he hesitated. His wolf recognized something in my tone, something that said touching my daughter would cost him more than he was willing to pay. That's when I felt it for the first time, that power sleeping in my bones, waking up because my daughter needed protection. It whispered through my blood like a promise, like a threat, like a truth I'd been denied my entire life. They will not touch her. Not now. Not ever. But I wasn't strong enough yet. Not then. The power was there, I could feel it, but I didn't know how to access it, didn't know how to channel it, didn't know how to make it obey my will instead of just lurking beneath my skin like a caged animal. The Supreme Alpha himself came to investigate the incident. Herba Warana was everything you'd expect from a wolf who'd held power for 50 years. cold, calculating, and absolutely certain of his superiority. He moved through the world like it existed solely for his convenience, like every other wolf was just a supporting character in his personal story. He looked at Tama the way you'd look at a bug under glass, clinical and detached, curious but not compassionate, interested but not kind. "Interesting," he murmured, circling us while I kept my daughter pressed against my legs, my body between her and every other wolf in the room. "There are stories, old stories, about wolves born with gifts. Wolves who could command elements, bend reality, speak to the ancient spirits." His eyes met mine and I saw something calculating there, something that made my skin crawl. But those wolves were always alphas. Always powerful bloodlines. Never omegas, Kaval finished, appearing at his uncle's side like a summoned demon. He'd gotten even more handsome since binding himself to Dija, as if happiness agreed with him, as if destroying me had somehow improved his life. It made me want to claw his face off, to ruin that perfect beauty the way he'd ruined everything good in my life. And certainly never bastards born from lies. I held Tama tighter. Herba smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. The smile of someone who'd found a new toy to play with, a new tool to exploit. "The pup stays with the pack. But she'll need special monitoring. We can't have unstable magic running loose, potentially harming pack members or attracting unwanted attention from other territories." He gestured to Seekin. "Set up a room in the medical wing. The child will sleep there from now on, where we can observe her properly. Run tests. Understand what she is." "No." The word came out before I could stop it, before I could remember my place, before I could think about consequences or punishment or the 100 ways they could make me suffer for defiance. The Supreme Alpha turned to me slowly. His eyebrows raised in theatrical surprise. "No." I was shaking. Every instinct I'd honed over years of survival was screaming at me to back down, apologize, grovel, beg for forgiveness. Show my throat, prove my submission, remember my place in the hierarchy. But I looked at my daughter's face, at those silver eyes so wide and frightened, and I couldn't. I couldn't let them take her. I couldn't let them turn her into a laboratory experiment, a thing to be studied and prodded and tested until they understood her power well enough to either exploit it or destroy it. "She stays with me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, steadier than I had any right to be. "She's my pup." The room held its breath. "You didn't say no to the Supreme Alpha. You didn't defy direct orders. You definitely didn't do it as an Omega, the lowest of the low, the one rank that existed solely to serve and submit." Herba studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he shrugged, a casual gesture that somehow felt more threatening than any display of anger would have been. "Fine. But she'll be watched. Constantly. I'm assigning guards to monitor both of you. And if anything else unusual happens, if there are any more incidents of unexplained power, we'll revisit this arrangement." He turned to leave, then paused, glancing back over his shoulder. "Oh, and Żmien. Remember your place. You exist here by our mercy. You breathe because we allow it. Don't make me regret my generosity." After they left, I held Tama in that storage closet and shook for an hour straight, terrified of what I'd almost lost, terrified of what was still coming. Because this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. They'd seen Tama's power now. And wolves like Herba didn't forget potential resources. They hoarded them, controlled them, exploited them until there was nothing left. That night, while Tama slept fitfully beside me, her small hand clutching my shirt like an anchor, I made a decision. I would learn to access whatever power was sleeping inside me. Because that moment in the dining hall, when I'd felt something ancient and fierce rising up, when I'd felt Seekin's hesitation, that wasn't normal Omega weakness. That was something else. That was survival waiting to become vengeance. I started training in earnest. Every moment Tama was sleeping or safely occupied with a few toys I'd managed to steal or create from scavenged materials, I was pushing my body to its limits and then beyond them. The basement had a forgotten storage room that no one used anymore, filled with broken furniture and mildewed boxes and the accumulated junk of decades. That became my training ground, my sanctuary, my laboratory for transformation. I taught myself to fight dirty, eyes, throat, groin, joints. Nothing was off limits when you were protecting your pup. Honor was a luxury for wolves who had the strength to enforce it. I learned to move through shadows, to control my breathing so completely that I could slow my heartbeat to almost nothing, making myself nearly invisible to other wolves' senses. I learned to hunt the rats that infested the basement, because protein was protein and my daughter needed to eat. I learned which parts were safe to consume and which could make you sick. I learned to skin them quickly, to cook them over a stolen camping stove until they were safe to eat, to make meals that Tama would actually consume without realizing what she was eating. I stole books from the pack library. Martial arts manuals, anatomy texts, military strategy guides, anything that might give me an edge. I read by stolen candlelight until my eyes burned, memorizing pressure points and vulnerable areas, learning the mechanics of how to hurt someone efficiently. But more than that, I learned to meditate, to sink deep into myself, past the fear and the trauma and the exhaustion, down to that place where the power lived. It was like diving into dark water, never knowing if you'd find the bottom or just drown in the attempt. For months I found nothing. Just darkness and my own desperate thoughts echoing in the void. Just the weight of failure pressing down on me, making me wonder if I'd imagined that power, if it had been nothing more than adrenaline and wishful thinking. Then one night I found her. Not the power, her. The wolf inside me. The one that should have emerged when I presented as Omega but never did. She'd been sleeping or hiding, or waiting for the right moment to reveal herself. She was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with fur the color of midnight and eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness of my mind. Finally, she growled in my mind, her voice ancient and amused, carrying the weight of centuries I didn't understand. I thought you'd never stop whimpering long enough to find me. Who are you? I whispered into the darkness, half afraid this was madness, half afraid it wasn't. I'm you, little Omega. The part they tried to suppress with their hierarchy and their cruelty, the part the blood moon blessed when you drew your first breath, the part that's been waiting for you to stop accepting their version of who you are and remember who you actually are. Who you were always meant to be. I'm nobody, I said, and I believed it. Believed it down to my bones, believed it in every cell of my body, believed it with the certainty of someone who'd been told they were nothing for so long that it had become truth. The wolf laughed, and the sound made my bones vibrate, made my soul resonate like a struck bell. No, beloved. You're everybody. You're every Omega they ever stepped on, every she-wolf they ever discarded, every mother they ever tried to break. And now your pup needs you to be more than that. So wake up. Wake up and become what you were born to be. I woke up gasping, my heart racing, sweat coating my skin despite the basement's chill. Tama was still sleeping beside me, undisturbed by whatever spiritual awakening I'd just experienced. But I felt different. Felt the power now, not sleeping but waiting. Ready. Training took on new intensity after that. The wolf, I called her Layla, an old Maltese name meaning night, guided me through exercises I didn't understand but obeyed anyway. She taught me to access strength I didn't know I had, to move with a predator's grace instead of prey's anxiety, to see in complete darkness as if the shadows themselves were illuminating my path, to scent lies on the air like blood and water. You're not Omega, Layla told me one night while I practiced complex fighting sequences in that forgotten storage room, my body moving through forms that felt both foreign and intimately familiar. You never were. The pack assigned you that rank because they couldn't sense what you really are, because your power was dormant, because the blood moon gift doesn't activate until it's needed. You're something the old ones called Harsa, the guardian. Born once in a generation, always in the lowest rank, always overlooked, always underestimated. Until the moment when the pack needs saving from itself. This pack doesn't deserve saving, I said bitterly, thinking of every cruelty, every casual violence, every deliberate humiliation. No, Layla agreed, her voice sad and knowing. But your daughter does. And there are others like you down here in the dark. Omegas who've been crushed under the pack's cruelty. They deserve better too. They deserve to remember their wolves, not things. That hierarchy is a choice, not destiny. She was right. I'd been so focused on my own survival, on protecting Tama, that I'd stopped seeing the others. Stopped seeing their suffering as anything more than background noise to my own tragedy. Kara, who'd been raped by a beta enforcer and blamed for it. Told she'd tempted him with her scent, her presence, her existence. She'd tried to report it, had gone to the pack authorities with bruises still fresh on her skin, and they'd laughed at her. Told her that Omegas didn't get raped because Omegas existed for that purpose. She'd stopped speaking after that, communicated only in gestures and broken eye contact. Tiffle, who'd lost 3 pups to accidents that were anything but accidental. The first had fallen down the stairs when someone had deliberately pushed the pregnant Omega. The second had been accidentally poisoned by cleaning supplies left where a curious toddler could reach them. The third had simply disappeared one night, and when Tiffle had reported her missing, the pack had implied she'd killed her own child. Tiffle's eyes were dead now, haunted, like she was just waiting for permission to stop existing. Zeba, who was missing an eye because she'd looked at an alpha's mate the wrong way. Or rather, she'd been looking at nothing in particular, but the alpha's mate had been paranoid and insecure and had decided that Zeba was trying to seduce her partner. The alpha had held Zeba down while his mate carved out her eye with a broken bottle, and the pack had ruled it justified discipline. Self-defense against an Omega's aggressive behavior. There were others. So many others. Each with their own scars, their own stories of systematic destruction, their own reasons for the deadness in their eyes. We were all broken. But broken things could be weapons if you shaped them right. If you gave them purpose. If you reminded them that broken didn't mean destroyed. I started gathering them slowly, carefully. Whispered conversations in the basement showers where the sound of running water covered our voices. Meaningful looks across the dining hall that said, "I see you, I know what was done to you, you're not alone." Small acts of rebellion. Extra food shared when no one was looking. Minor acts of defiance covered up. Alibis provided for each other when the pack came looking for someone to punish. "They've conditioned us to turn on each other," I told them during one of our secret meetings in that forgotten storage room. 6 of us crowded together in the darkness. "They keep us fighting over scraps so we don't realize that together, we could take the whole feast. Together we're still just Omegas," Kara signed, her hands moving in the simple sign language we'd developed. "They'll always be stronger." "Stronger isn't better," I said. "Smarter is better. More desperate is better. More willing to do what they won't is better. They think they've broken us. Let them keep thinking that. Let them keep underestimating us. And when the moment comes," I let the sentence hang. "We became a network. Not a resistance, not yet. Just Omegas remembering that we were wolves too. That we had teeth and claws and the capacity for violence that they'd tried to suppress but never quite eliminated. I taught them what Layla had taught me. How to fight, how to move silently, how to see in darkness, how to survive on almost nothing. How to steal without getting caught, how to hide resources, how to create dead drops and secret signals. How to make weapons from common items. How a pen could become a stabbing implement. How cleaning chemicals could be combined to create toxic fumes. How a sock filled with soap could break bones. But more importantly, I taught them to remember their worth. To look at themselves and see wolves instead of waste. To believe that they deserved better than what the pack had given them. Tama turned 4, then 5. Her power grew with her, becoming harder to hide, more volatile, more dangerous to everyone around her when she couldn't control it. Lights would flicker when she was upset. Small objects would move without being touched, skittering across surfaces like living things. Once, when another pup pushed her down during a rare moment when she was allowed to play with the higher-ranked children, every window in the pack house shattered simultaneously. Just exploded outward in a cascade of glittering glass, like the building itself was screaming her rage. The pack's fear of her grew too. And with it, their desire to control her. To break her before she became too powerful to break. To ensure that whatever she was, she would serve the pack rather than threaten it. "She should be trained by our shamans," Krula insisted during one of the Supreme Alpha's assemblies. her voice carrying across the hall with practiced projection. That power needs to be bound, directed, contained before she hurts someone. Before she becomes a liability we can't manage. She's never hurt anyone, I said from my place at the back of the hall, where Omegas were required to stand, where we were visible reminders of what happened when you failed to climb the hierarchy. Krula's lip curled in disgust. She's a threat. Everyone can see it except you, blinded by maternal delusion. That child is a weapon waiting to go off, and when she does, innocent wolves will suffer. That's when Kaval spoke up, his voice dripping with false concern, playing the role of reasonable mediator. Perhaps a compromise. Let the shamans assess her, determine if she's dangerous. If she's not, she stays with her mother. If she is. He shrugged elegantly, as if discussing the weather rather than my daughter's fate. Then we do what's necessary for the pack's safety. The assessment was scheduled for the following week. I had 7 days to prepare for the worst because I knew in my bones, knew with the certainty of someone who'd watched this pack operate for decades, that they would declare Tama dangerous regardless of the truth. This was their excuse to take her from me, to break me completely, to prove that Omegas couldn't be mothers, that we were inherently unfit for anything beyond servitude. I spent those 7 days getting ready for war. Layla and I trained until I could shift in under a second, my body transforming from human to wolf with barely a thought. Until my reflexes were faster than conscious decision, operating on pure instinct. Until I could take down opponents twice my size without breaking a sweat, using their weight and momentum against them. I mapped every exit from the pack house, memorized patrol schedules, identified every security weakness. I identified every ally among the Omegas, every wolf who might help or at least not interfere. I cached supplies in hidden locations throughout the territory. Food, water, weapons, first aid supplies, everything we'd need if we had to run. And I told Tama the truth. All of it. Who her father was, why the pack hated us, what they were planning to do. I sat her down in our storage closet and explained, in terms a 5-year-old could understand, that sometimes the world was cruel to people who were different, that sometimes people with power used it to hurt instead of help, that sometimes mothers had to make very hard choices to keep their pups safe. She listened with those 2 old eyes that had seen more suffering in 5 years than most wolves saw in lifetimes, and when I finished, she climbed into my lap and put her small hands on either side of my face, forcing me to meet her gaze. "Mama, you're scared." "Yes," I admitted. No point lying to a pup who could make windows shatter with her emotions, who could sense feelings like other wolves sensed sense. "Don't be," Tama said seriously, her voice carrying a weight that didn't belong to someone so young. "They can't take me from you. I won't let them." The day of the assessment arrived with cruel sunshine, bright and cheerful and completely at odds with the dread sitting in my stomach like a stone. Like the world was mocking us, providing beautiful weather for our destruction. The shamans, 3 ancient wolves who'd forgotten more about magic than the rest of the pack would ever know, set up their ritual space in the pack's ceremonial hall. Incense burned in braziers, filling the air with thick, cloying smoke. Ritual circles were drawn in salt and ash on the marble floor. Ancient symbols that predated written language were painted on the walls in what looked disturbingly like blood. Practically the entire pack attended. This was entertainment for them, watching an Omega be put in her place, watching a strange pup be judged and found wanting. They filled the viewing galleries, whispered excitedly among themselves, placed bets on what the assessment would reveal. Kaval and Dija sat in the front row, his arm around her shoulders, their twin expressions of smug satisfaction making my hands curl into fists hard enough that my nails drew blood from my palms. They looked so pleased with themselves, so certain of the outcome. Dija leaned close to whisper something in Kaval's ear, and he laughed, the sound carrying across the hall. Herba presided from his throne-like chair on the raised platform, looking bored with the whole proceeding. He examined his nails, adjusted his ceremonial robes, barely glanced at us. We weren't worth his full attention. We were just a formality, a problem to be processed and filed away. The head shaman, an ancient female named Saha Kadama, gestured for Tama to step forward. Her hands were gnarled with age, covered in ritual scars and tattoos that marked her as someone who'd communed with powers most wolves couldn't imagine. Her eyes were milky with cataracts, but I had the unsettling feeling she could see more than any of us. My daughter walked calmly to the center of the ritual circle, her small back straight, her silver eyes fearless. She looked so tiny in that massive space, so vulnerable surrounded by symbols of power she didn't understand. But she walked like she owned the ground beneath her feet, like she was doing them a favor by submitting to their examination. "Child," Saha began, her voice crackling like old paper, like ancient trees in the wind, "we need to examine your power to understand what you are. This may be uncomfortable. It may be frightening. Do you consent?" Tama looked at me. I nodded, though everything in me screamed to grab her and run, to fight our way out of the hall, to do anything except let them touch my daughter. "I consent," Tama said clearly, her voice steady and strong. The shamans began their ritual, chanting in the old language that predated packs and territories, words that made the air itself vibrate. They burned herbs that filled the hall with acrid smoke that stung my eyes and made my throat burn. Power gathered in the room like a building storm, pressing against everyone's skin, making the weaker wolves whimper and the stronger ones tense. Temperature dropped. The lights dimmed. Something old and vast and utterly inhuman turned its attention toward us. Then Saha placed her hand on Tama's forehead, and everything exploded. Light burst from my daughter like a supernova, silver and gold and colors that didn't have names, colors that shouldn't exist in the natural world. The shamans were thrown backward, their ritual circle shattering, the carefully drawn symbols fragmenting into meaningless chaos. Every wolf in the hall felt it, that ancient primal power that predated packs and hierarchies and all the petty structures we'd built to make ourselves feel important. And in that light, images appeared. Visions. Memories that weren't Tama's memories, because they were older than she was. Older than all of us. Older than the pack itself. I saw the first wolves, the ones who'd been blessed by the moon goddess herself when she walked among mortals. I saw them building packs based not on strength but on wisdom, not on dominance but on care. Every wolf had value. Every voice was heard. The strong protected the weak not because it was their duty but because it was their honor. I saw the original Harsa, guardians who emerged when the pack strayed too far from the goddess's vision, who reminded them what they were supposed to be. They weren't warriors or rulers. They were mirrors, reflecting back the truth of what packs had become, forcing wolves to confront the distance between their ideals and their reality. And I saw Tama's future. Not all of it, just flashes, images that burned themselves into my mind with the weight of prophecy. Her standing before the Continental Wolf Council. Her voice commanding thousands. Her breaking chains that had bound omegas for generations, physical and metaphorical chains. Her rewriting the laws that had made hierarchy into tyranny. Her standing in the ruins of old systems and building something new from the rubble. The vision ended. Tama stood in the center of the broken circle, unmarked, unharmed, radiating enough power to make the Supreme Alpha himself take an involuntary step backward. The light faded slowly, reluctantly, like it didn't want to leave her. For a moment I could see her wolf, not just sense it but see it, superimposed over her small human form. It was massive, luminous, terrible in its beauty. Saha Kadama pulled herself to her feet, her ancient face pale with shock, with something that looked like religious awe. When she spoke, her voice shook. "She's not dangerous. She's blessed. She's what we were before we forgot. Before we let pride corrupt the goddess's gift. She's a Koa Talba, a calling power. Born once every 1,000 years to remind us of our purpose." The hall erupted in chaos. Some wolves were crying, overwhelmed by the vision's emotional weight. Others were arguing, trying to rationalize what they'd seen, trying to fit it into their worldview. Most looked terrified, confronted with power they couldn't control or understand. Wolves were fleeing the hall, unable to bear the presence of something so much greater than themselves. Others were prostrating themselves, wolf instinct overwhelming human pride. Kaval had gone white, finally understanding what he'd rejected, what he'd thrown away. The blood had drained from his face, and he was staring at Tama like she was both miracle and judgment. Dija was clutching his arm, her perfect face twisted with naked jealousy, with rage at being overshadowed, with fear that the life she'd built might come crashing down. And Herba was looking at Tama the way a collector looks at a priceless artifact. The way a general looks at a weapon that could win wars. The way a parasite looks at a host. "The child will be trained," he announced, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk. "But not by force. We've been given a gift, a chance to remember our true purpose. She'll be honored, protected, given everything she needs to reach her potential." He smiled at me, and I felt cold dread settle in my stomach like poisoned water. Of course, such a blessed child needs proper guidance. She'll need to be moved from the basement, given tutors, introduced to pack society at the highest levels. She needs to associate with wolves worthy of her power, wolves who can guide her properly. His eyes locked on mine and his smile widened, away from the limitations of her current environment. There it was, dressed in pretty words and noble intentions, but the meaning was clear as crystal. They were taking her from me. They would put her in a gilded cage, surround her with their influence, shape her into a tool for their purposes. They would tell her that her mother was unworthy, that Omegas were beneath her, that she deserved better than the wolf who'd kept her alive through sheer stubborn will. No! My voice rang out across the hall, and this time I didn't shake. This time I had Layla's strength flooding through me, that ancient power awakening fully, responding to my rage and my love and my absolute refusal to let them win. Herba's smile didn't waver. If anything, it grew more condescending. "I wasn't asking permission, Omega. The pack has decided. The child stays here, under proper supervision. You should be grateful. She'll have opportunities you could never provide. And I wasn't offering a choice, Supreme Alpha." I walked forward, and this time I didn't keep my eyes down, didn't show submission, didn't play the role they'd assigned me. Every eye in the hall tracked my movement. I'd spent 5 years making myself invisible. Now I wanted them to see me. Now I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd created with their cruelty. "My daughter stays with me. Non-negotiable." Seekin moved to intercept me, his massive hand reaching for Tama. He was smiling, eager for the excuse to hurt me, to put the uppity Omega back in her place. His fingers were inches from my daughter's shoulder. That's when it happened. That's when the power I'd been building for years, that rage I'd been compressing into diamond hardness, that love that burned hotter than any alpha's fury, all of it exploded outward in a wave of pure, primal authority. "Don't. Pop." The words came out as a growl that cracked the marble floor, split it down the center like the earth itself was rejecting the pack's authority. I felt something fundamental shift in the pack bonds, in the hierarchy itself, in the invisible web of power and submission that held the pack structure together. Those bonds snapped, reformed, rearranged themselves around a new center of gravity. Me. The Supreme Alpha, the most powerful wolf in the territory, dropped to his knees. So did every other alpha in the hall. And every beta. And every gamma, every ranked wolf, every wolf who'd built their identity on being above someone else, every wolf who'd mistaken cruelty for strength, every wolf except Tama and me. They couldn't help it. Their wolves recognized what I'd become, what I'd always been beneath the Omega disguise. Their instincts overrode their pride, their prejudice, their carefully constructed superiority. The Guardian had revealed herself, and wolf instinct demanded submission to that ancient authority. I walked through the kneeling wolves to my daughter, my footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent hall. I took her hand, felt her small fingers grip mine with complete trust, and turned back to face Herba. He was still on his knees, his face a mask of shock and dawning understanding and something that looked like fear. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice carrying the weight of every Omega who'd ever been broken by this pack, every she-wolf who'd been discarded, every mother who'd had her children threatened. "Tama and I are leaving. We're going to the Continental Court to register a formal complaint against this pack for systematic abuse, for forced rejection of a mating bond, for attempted child separation, for every single law you've broken in the name of hierarchy. And then we're going to watch while they investigate every single crime you've committed." "You can't," Cruella gasped from her kneeling position, her voice small and frightened. "You're nobody. You have no standing. They won't even see you." I smiled, and I knew it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a wolf who'd learned to bite back, who'd sharpened her teeth on suffering and was ready to draw blood. "They'll see us. Because my daughter isn't just blessed. She's a Koa Talba, a calling power. And I'm her Harsa, her guardian." The Continental Court has laws that predate your pack, laws written by the moon goddess herself to protect wolves like us specifically because she knew that packs like yours would try to destroy us. I started walking toward the exit, Tama's hand secure in mine. The kneeling wolves parted before us like water, scrambling to get out of our way, pressing themselves against walls and columns to avoid our path. "If you try to stop us," I said without looking back, my voice echoing off the marble and stone, "if you send enforcers after us, if you so much as think about hurting my daughter, I will return. And next time I won't be asking you to kneel. I'll be making you crawl. I'll be burning this pack house to the ground and salting the earth where it stood. I'll be ensuring that the name Ħama becomes a warning instead of a legacy." We walked out of the Ħama Pack house into the bright sunshine, and I didn't look back. Behind us, I could hear the pack dissolving into chaos. Arguments erupting, wolves scrambling to figure out what had just happened, the careful hierarchy collapsing into confusion. But ahead of us was freedom. Ahead of us was justice. Ahead of us was a chance to build something better. The journey to the Continental Court took 3 weeks. We traveled through territories that had never seen an Omega traveling alone, especially not one radiating the kind of power I couldn't quite suppress anymore. Through packs that tried to rescue Tama from me, convinced I'd kidnapped a blessed child. Through wilderness that tested every survival skill I'd learned, every lesson Layla had taught me. We were followed for the first week. Ḥama Pack enforcers trying to be subtle about tracking us, waiting for us to let our guard down. Killed 2 of them. Not proudly, not happily, but efficiently. Necessary violence committed by a mother protecting her pup. The others turned back after that, reporting to Herba that the Omega had become something they couldn't handle. We encountered a rogue pack in the second week, lone wolves who'd been exiled from their own territories and had formed a vicious coalition. They saw a mother and child traveling alone and thought we'd be easy prey. They were wrong. I left 3 of them dead and the rest scattered, and Tama helped. Her power reaching out to confuse them, to make them see shadows that weren't there, to turn their own fear against them. By the 3rd week, word had spread. The Omega who'd made a supreme alpha kneel. The child who'd been blessed by the goddess. We were given space wherever we went, wide berths and fearful respect. Some packs offered us shelter. Others barred their doors against us, afraid of what we represented. But we made it. The Continental Court was housed in a fortress carved into a mountain, walls of stone that had stood for thousands of years, a neutral ground where representatives from every major pack on the continent gathered to resolve disputes and enforce the ancient laws. It was meant to be intimidating, and it worked. The sheer size of it, the weight of history pressing down from every stone, the sense that you were walking on sacred ground where the goddess herself had once walked. The guards at the entrance tried to turn us away. Omegas file complaints through their supreme alphas, one said condescendingly, not even looking at me, addressing his words to the air above my head like I wasn't worth eye contact. Tama looked up at him, and every torch in the entrance hall flared bright enough to blind. The flames reached toward the ceiling, roaring with sudden fury, responding to her will. "We're not asking permission." They let us through. Smart wolves. The formal complaint took hours to file. I had to recount every detail. Caval's betrayal, the pack's systematic abuse, the attempted separation, every crime great and small. The court clerk, a severe beta female named Girata with a face like carved stone, listened with an expression that gave away nothing. She made notes on official documents, asked clarifying questions in a tone that managed to be both professional and skeptical. "These are serious accusations," she said when I finished, setting down her pen with precise care. "But the Ħama Pack is well respected, and their supreme alpha has significant influence in this court. Your testimony alone won't be enough. We'll need corroborating evidence, witnesses, something beyond the word of an Omega against an entire pack hierarchy." "It's not just my testimony," I said, and pulled out the small recorder I'd been carrying for years, the cheap device I'd found in the packhouse trash and repaired. "I have evidence. I'd been recording things for 3 years. Conversations where pack members admitted to their cruelty, moments where Kaval and Dija laughed about the Omega they destroyed, incidents of violence that the pack had covered up. Hours and hours of evidence captured by a device so small and unnoticed that no one had ever thought to look for it. Who pays attention to an Omega carrying a broken phone? Who suspects the basement trash of having the intelligence to document their own oppression?" Girata's expression changed as she listened, her professional mask cracking to reveal shock, then disgust, then cold fury. "This is comprehensive." "I had time," I said dryly. "Omegas get very good at listening without being noticed." The court agreed to hear our case. The trial was set for 2 weeks from then, which gave the Ħama Pack time to send representatives and prepare their defense. They sent everyone. Herba arrived with an entourage of 50 wolves, including Kaval, Dija, and every ranked member of the pack who could possibly lend credibility or intimidation. They took over an entire inn, made a show of their wealth and power, threw money around like water. They reminded everyone watching that they were a pack not to be trifled with, a pack with resources and connections and the kind of influence that could make problems disappear. I didn't care. Let them spend their money. Let them flex their power. None of it would change the truth. The trial was held in the court's main chamber, a massive hall with vaulted ceilings that reached toward the sky, walls covered in pack sigils from across the continent representing thousands of years of wolf history. 5 judges presided, representing the 5 original wolf territories. They were old, powerful, and I hoped desperately impartial. The Ħama Pack's lawyer was smooth, polished, and armed with 3 centuries of precedent about pack hierarchy and Omega rights. He was a silver-tongued beta named Kelb Gay who could make cruelty sound like kindness, abuse sound like discipline. He painted me as a disgruntled wolf with delusions of grandeur, my daughter as a confused pup with uncontrolled power who needed proper guidance. "The pack provided for them," he argued smoothly, his voice carrying across the chamber with practiced ease. "Gave them shelter, food, community. If the accommodations weren't to the Omega standards, perhaps that speaks more to her ingratitude than to pack cruelty. Not every wolf can live in luxury. The pack structure requires different levels of accommodation, and Omegas, by their nature, occupy the service positions. This is how it's always been. This is how the goddess designed us." He presented character witnesses who swore the Ħama Pack was fair and just. He cited pack law that gave supreme alphas broad authority over pack members. He argued that taking a blessed pup from an unstable Omega mother wasn't cruelty. It was responsible leadership. Then it was my turn. I played the recordings. Every vicious comment, every casual cruelty, every laughing admission of abuse. I showed photographs I'd taken secretly, of the basement conditions of my storage closet room where a child had been forced to sleep, of the scars I carried from pack discipline. I presented testimony from the Omegas who'd found the courage to come forward, wolves who'd traveled to the court despite their terror to tell their own stories. Kara testified in sign language, describing her rape in clinical detail that made several judges flinch. Tifl testified about her murdered pups, about the pack's indifference to Omega children. Zeba testified about losing her eye, about the casual violence that had been ruled justified. And then Tama testified. My 5-year-old daughter stood before 5 of the most powerful wolves on the continent and told them the truth with a clarity that would have shamed adults 3 times her age. She described watching me starve so she could eat, seeing other Omegas beaten for minor infractions, living in fear that every day might be the day they took her away. She spoke without notes, without hesitation, recounting memories with perfect detail. "They don't think we're wolves," Tama said, her silver eyes meeting each judge's gaze in turn, holding their attention with that preternatural presence. "They think we're things. And things don't deserve kindness. Things don't have feelings. Things can be broken and nobody cares." The chamber was silent when she finished. Even Kelb Gay had no immediate response, no smooth counter-argument ready. Then Kaval stood up, his beautiful face arranged in an expression of concerned confusion. "The child is clearly traumatized and confused. Her mother has poisoned her against the pack that only wanted to help her. This is exactly why unstable omegas shouldn't be raising pups without proper pack guidance. The child needs deprogramming, therapy, protection from the mother who's clearly damaged her psychologically." That's when I felt Layla rise fully, felt that guardian power flood through me one more time, stronger than ever before, fed by righteous fury and absolute conviction. "Tell them," I said to Kaval, my voice carrying across the chamber with supernatural clarity, with the weight of command that couldn't be denied. "Tell them you're her father. Tell them you mated with me and then called me a liar. Tell them the truth, Alpha, or I'll rip it from your throat myself." There was power in my words now, the kind that couldn't be resisted, that bypassed conscious will and spoke directly to the wolf inside. Kaval's face went pale, his entire body shaking with the effort of resisting, but he couldn't. The Guardian's command was absolute. The truth came spilling out like blood from a wound, like poison from a lanced boil. "I used her," he said, the words forced through clenched teeth. "She was easy. An omega desperate for attention, for someone to tell her she mattered. I used her because I could, because it was entertaining, because alphas don't mate with trash but they can certainly fuck it. And when she got pregnant, I denied it because a supreme alpha's nephew doesn't saddle himself with basement genetics. I denied it because my uncle had arranged my match with Dija, because pack politics mattered more than some omega's feelings, because I knew everyone would believe me over her." The chamber exploded into chaos. Dija was screaming at him, her perfect mask of supportive mate shattered completely, revealing the ugly rage beneath. She was hitting him, clawing at his face, shrieking about humiliation and lies and how dare he. Herba looked like he'd been struck by lightning, his carefully constructed political image crumbling in real time. The judges were conferring urgently among themselves, their expressions ranging from shock to disgust. And I just stood there, holding Tama's hand, finally vindicated after years of being called a liar. The verdict came down 3 days later. The Ħama Pack was found guilty of systematic abuse, forced rejection of mating bonds, attempted child endangerment, and violations of at least 30 different clauses in the ancient laws. They were fined heavily enough to cripple their finances for decades. Herba was removed as Supreme Alpha, stripped of his title, replaced by a court-appointed administrator until proper reforms could be implemented. Kaval was stripped of his rank and exiled from the pack entirely, forbidden from joining any other pack for 10 years. His bond with Dija was dissolved by court order. She'd petitioned for it immediately after his confession, wanting nothing to do with him. Last I heard, he was living as a lone wolf somewhere in the Northern Territories, his beautiful face marked with the scars of exile and survival, his reputation destroyed completely. And me. The court did something unprecedented. They recognized me as a Harsa, formally acknowledged my role as guardian. They granted Tama and me protected status under the ancient laws, gave us resources to establish our own pack. A pack for wolves like us, the ones who'd fallen through the cracks of the hierarchy, the ones who'd been broken but not destroyed. We call it the doll pack, the light pack. And we're growing. Omegas are finding their way to us from across the continent, bringing their stories of abuse and their hunger for something better. We're teaching them what I learned, that Omega doesn't mean weak, that the lowest rank doesn't mean lowest value, that the pack structure only works when it protects everyone, not just the strong. We're building something new. Something that honors the goddess's original vision. Kara is our head of security now, using the rage from her trauma to protect others from experiencing the same. Tifl runs our pup care program, ensuring no child in our pack ever knows the fear her own children died from. Zeba trains our fighters, teaching them that missing an eye doesn't mean missing your bite. Tama is 8 now. Her power has grown into something beautiful and terrifying. She can do things the shamans say shouldn't be possible. Heal wounds with a touch, communicate with wolves hundreds of miles away through pure thought, see through lies like glass, manipulate the elements in ways that defy understanding. She can call rain from clear skies, make plants grow with her presence, sense danger before it arrives. But more than that, she's kind. Despite everything we went through, despite having every reason to be cruel, she leads with compassion. She remembers what it felt like to be powerless, and she uses her power to protect those who still are. She's already better than I ever was, already wiser, already more whole than I ever managed to be. She speaks at other packs now, invited by wolves who've heard her story. She tells them about growing up in a basement, about watching her mother starve, about learning that hierarchy is a choice, not a destiny. She tells them that power without compassion is just cruelty with better marketing. She tells them that the goddess blessed everyone, not just alphas, and that forgetting that fact is how packs lose their way. Some packs listen, others don't. But slowly things are changing. Other guardians are emerging from the shadows, revealing themselves now that they know they're not alone. Other blessed pups are being protected instead of exploited. The Continental Court has started investigating other packs with suspicious histories, other hierarchies built on systematic abuse. It's not enough. Not yet. But it's a start. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd accepted my place, if I'd let them take her, if I'd stayed broken and silent and obedient. If I'd believed what they told me about my worth. Then I look at my daughter, at the pack we've built, at the Omegas who are remembering their strength, and I'm grateful for every moment of pain that led us here. Grateful for the suffering that taught me to fight. Grateful for the cruelty that showed me what needed to change. Because they were right about one thing. I am nobody by their standards. By the standards of wolves who measure worth in rank and power and dominance, I'm nothing. But by my own standards, by my daughter's standards, by the standards of every wolf we've saved from packs like Ħama, I'm everybody who refused to stay down. I'm the Omega they mocked. I'm the mother they tried to break. I'm the guardian they never saw coming. And I'm not finished yet. We're building a network of packs across the continent that honor the old ways, that remember what the goddess intended. We're training new guardians, protecting new blessed children, rewriting the rules that have caused so much suffering. The Continental Court has offered me a position as an advisor on Omega rights. Other packs are requesting consultations, wanting to reform their hierarchies before guardians emerge to force the issue. The old power structures are crumbling, slowly but inevitably, and in their place something better is growing. My name is Żmien. I was born under a blood moon to a pack that saw me as cursed. I was broken and discarded and told I was nothing. And now I'm the wolf that makes supreme alphas kneel. If this story grabbed you, if you felt Żmien's rage and Tama's power, if you understood that rage that comes from watching your child threatened, smash that like button and subscribe because there are more stories where this came from. Stories of wolves who refuse to accept the roles they're given.